How are you doing on keeping up in the book with what's on the slide? Is that working okay without us telling you where we're at? Okay. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. So we are on session 6, page 37. 39 is where the slides are going to start. So as you can tell, today ends up being a lot more practical on what to do, giving you some tools. This session we want to give you some more tools on how to resolve conflict. And the fact that we have conflict in our relationships. I have had people tell me, I've met people tell me, we have never had a fight in our relationship. And I believe them. But one of the things that I've done is start asking them some questions about their relationship. And what tends to happen is it's not a very deep relationship. They don't know each other very well. Ask them some questions about their mate, and they're like, I don't know. Am I supposed to know that? So as we get to know our mate, if we're going to have a meaningful relationship, eventually we are going to have conflict. As we did the breakout session, some of the older people, I'm not sure, whatever I say I'm going to get myself in trouble. I don't know how, but I got to go with the younger people, so I guess the mirror thinks I'm young or something. I don't know. But anyway, one of the things that we talked about just in general was how different, even for young couples, they recognize, man, we're different, and how sometimes differences can cause conflict. So this afternoon we're going to talk about conflict resolution, or how to fight fair. What's the fun in that, right? Who wants to fight fair? But if you want to come to a resolution, you're going to have to fight somewhat fair. So it doesn't mean that from time to time you can't get in your little digs, right? You never do that? No? So last night I talked about broken relationships and how that all relationships are broken. So do we want relationship resolution? Do we want relationships that are put back together, made whole? So every relationship, if it has, if you spent time with somebody, if it's going to be a meaningful relationship, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be some kind of brokenness that's going to have to be healed, restored. And this verse tells us that God has given us what we need to restore, hath given us the ministry of reconciliation, and has committed to us the words of reconciliation. The thing that's fascinating about those two concepts there, those two things that are underlined, the first one is ministry. What do you think about the word ministry? When I say ministry, what comes to mind? A job. Work. So reconciliation, the ministry of reconciliation, it's going to take some work, right? And then the second one, hath committed to us the words. When I say words, what comes to mind? A conversation, right? It's going to take some conversation, some back and forth. So healed relationships is going to take some work and some conversations. Does that make sense? So I want to talk about some tools. We can have restored relationships, but it will take some work, some time, some effort, some conversations. So I want to talk about levels of relationships. Do you have friends that you just know as acquaintances? Do you have friends that knows things about you that you wouldn't want anybody to ever tell? Anybody to ever know? Probably, right? Those kinds of friendships are different, right? Different levels. One's casual, one's more intimate. They know things about you that, it might be murder if they tell, right? So secrets might have been promised that not going to tell certain things. So I want to talk about levels of relationships, because I think if we understand, and I'll try really hard to not put you to sleep and make this too dry, but if we can understand a little bit about how relationships work and different levels of relationships and what we want an ultimate relationship to look like, it might help us get there. And so the very first, his clicker is different than mine. The very first kind of relationship or level of relationship is a casual relationship. And this is someone that you know, an acquaintance, just surface, no real depth is going to be revealed about yourself. Not your deepest feelings or thoughts. They're not going to know about your dreams or motivations or failures. And a casual relationship, we intentionally keep these people at arm's length. We don't want them, if the intent is a casual relationship, we don't want them to know everything there is about us. So the second level of relationship is called chaotic. And this is where, from casual, you start to share some of your feelings and your thoughts, your dreams, things that make you who you are. And this starts to create some chaotic feelings because you are giving people things that make you vulnerable. And so it creates some chaos of emotions that we have to start working through. And the idea is, as we work through our emotions of the chaos of one of the things that all of our younger people said about one of the biggest challenges was differences. And in order to make their relationships better, they had to work through those differences. So they were seeing some chaos, right? And what happens if you don't work through the chaos? What happens is you end up either stuck in chaos, which I know marriages that's where they're at. They don't want to reveal, but if they do reveal, it creates chaos. They have conflict all the time because of how the person deals with them and how they deal with them, and it's just always chaotic. So because of this chaos, one of two things will happen usually. Some relationships will stay there, but normally one of two things. You will pull back and not reveal, and you go back to a casual relationship. Or you will continue to work on the chaos and start to work through your differences and start to understand who the other person is and start to appreciate the other things that are different about the other person. And it starts moving us from this chaos to a little more understanding. Now, one of the things about relationships is differences. And we start seeing differences as something that we don't like because it's not like us, it's foreign, we don't understand it. And so we try to avoid it. And one of the things that can happen in this chaotic stage is we try to control the other person. We try to make them like us. If you only, if you would, those kinds of statements. And controlling the other person to be something else so you can accept them doesn't make for a good relationship. Getting through the chaotic relationship, part of that is accepting the person for who they are and them accepting you for who you are, which starts to move us back to casual. There we go. Starts to move us to a level of acceptance, right? So we start accepting the differences and start to understand the fact that differences aren't bad. Matter of fact, Brother Tom asked, how many of you were attracted to your mate because they were different? And there was a lot of hands went up, right? One of the things that I have found when I've did counseling sessions with people is I've asked them, what attracted you? Differences. And then you ask, what annoys you? Differences. The very thing that attracted you later can be the very thing that drives you crazy because you don't accept it for who they are. It's what makes them you, makes them them. If you changed all their differences, they would be you. And my parents always said, we have enough Jeff Harlans in the world. We don't need more, right? Accept people for who they are. It's not a good thing. I appreciate my wife for who and what she is, the fact that she's different. And the fact we're different, we complement each other. And so there becomes a level of acceptance as we start to appreciate and love and respect those things that are different. And then we end up, as we accept those things that are different about one another, we end up having these feelings for one another, and we can start having genuine intimacy towards one another, that someone, after we accept them and they accept us, there comes a point to where someone knows your faults and they still decide that you're okay. And they still decide that they love you. And they still decide that they respect you. You can be who you are and feel appreciated for you, who you are, and not rejected for who you are. Does that make sense? And so these are 4 levels of any relationship. And it's really hard to get to acceptance and genuine relationship. Most relationship stays in the casual and the chaotic state. We want relationships to move to acceptance and then genuine intimacy. I want to talk just a second about hindrances to getting to genuine acceptance. And it's pretty easy to guess what they are, right? Selfishness. Yeah. When you stop looking out for your mate and you start looking out for yourself, you are not going to get to acceptance, right? Because you got to make sure that you get yours, and so it's not about the other person, it becomes about you and what is fair, which then we're trying to control the other person to make them like us so that they will like us if they're like us, and we will like them if they are like us. Selfishness, controlling are very, very detrimental, and to win. And here's the thing. If there is a winner in an argument, in a relationship, the relationship loses. Trust me. If you're keeping score, and if you want to win an argument, and there have been times that Joyce and I will have a discussion, and I'm like, I'm right. She eventually convinces me I'm wrong, but I'm right. And here's the thing. If I beat her into submission about my being right, she then pulls away. And so what we're looking at is getting from casual through the chaotic to acceptance to genuine. And if you force somebody to accept that you're right and they pull away, that's not genuine intimacy, right? So selfishness, control, and thinking you have to win and be right are going to be detrimental to this genuine intimacy. I'm right, me too. Everybody can't be right, right? It's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about the relationship. And the only winner of a fight should be your relationship. The object is defined. I'm sorry. You can't hear me when I read it up there. The only winner of a fight should be your relationship. The object is to find a better way to coexist. Does that make sense? No winners, no losers. Working through this chaos, like I said, when we get to chaos, we can do one of two things. Move back to casual or start moving to being accepted. Conflict is not bad. Now, I hate conflict. I am a peace lover. But I've come to realize that if I want to know things about my wife that no one else knows, I'm going to have to work through some conflict. So I have to show up. And I have learned to do that. And I start to understand that if we can get through the chaos part, the conflict part, there's a part of acceptance. And so the conflict is not bad. What's bad is unresolved conflict, which keeps you in chaos. So you got to work it out, come to a compromise, a solution, understanding who the person is, why are they different, why my wife didn't want me to just bring her soup when she was sick every 4 hours when she asked for it, when she wanted me either in the room or ask me how she was or bringing her Kleenex or whatever. She wanted me to show concern, right? And so she kept asking me, it's like, this is conflict. But once we talked about it and I understood what she wanted, it was easy for me more often every 10 minutes to check in with her. And then she started to feel like that I was showing her love, and all I was doing what she wanted me to do. And it took us a while to understand that difference, something just that simple, to move us from conflict into acceptance. And once I accepted, that's what she wanted. And when I was sick, she wanted to kind of mother me, that kind of thing. I don't want to be mothered. I'm sick. Leave me alone, right? And so she started to understand that I wasn't rejecting her in wanting to recuperate, but that's what communicated what I needed. Does that make sense? So unresolved conflict is what is bad and which keeps us in a chaotic relationship. Conflict is like fire. It can illuminate, right? Or it can destroy. It can consume. And that is the difference in chaos or the chaotic level or moving to acceptance. Having conflict illuminate or having conflict consume our relationship. Okay, I want to talk about a study that was done. So, in dealing with the Fatal Four, there are 4 red flags that a researcher has come up with that when they see couples do this in their marriage, they will not survive. These are things that no relationship, whether it be married people, whether it be siblings, parents, child, friends, and husbands and wives, these four things will destroy a relationship. And they are, the first one is criticism. And you might say, what is criticism? Well, you know it when you hear it. It includes you statement. Where have you been? You always make us late. Complaining is not a factor of criticism. A matter of fact, complaining can help a relationship if it includes I statements in identifying a problem to help the relationship be better. Does that make sense? But criticism will kill a relationship. The difference between criticism and complaining is you statements and I statements. Criticism is you, and often followed by you always, right? And complaining is an I statement. I feel this way when. There's a big difference there, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about I statements versus you statements in just a second. The second thing in dealing with the Fatal Four is defensiveness. And criticism often provokes one being defensive. When you feel attacked, our natural response is to defend ourselves. You always make us late elicits a defensive response. It's not my fault. Or if you ever would help me get ready, we wouldn't be late. So being defensive, there's no discussion, right? It's just, this is your fault, it's you, and then it's not my fault, and then there's usually a you statement back to the other part. And the chaotic state, we can never move from that to acceptance with criticism and defensiveness. The third one is contempt. Contempt is an extension of criticism, but it takes it to a whole new level. It's an action being criticized, but contempt is a judgment of the character of the person. Contempt can include name-calling, tone of voice, and sometimes communicated non-verbally. What do I mean by that? Did that communicate anything to you? Yeah. So a look of ignoring someone. So it's complaining taken to a whole new level in contempt of who the person is, judgment of the person. Where have you been? You always make us late. Becomes, you're the rudest, most inconsiderate person I know, right? So, because you make us late. So, it's a judgment on top of a criticism. And then the other fourth thing that creates issues is stonewalling. And stonewalling is when you are unpenetrable. Nothing can ever get around you or through you. And what I mean by that is the person will just give up, say something like this. Okay, just tell me what you want me to do. Okay, what do you want me to say? Or the notorious whatever. Which you don't mean whatever, right? What you mean is, I don't care what you say, it's not going to change me. You're not going to move me, and I'm not going to show up for the conversation. Does that make sense? And so stonewalling, a relationship can never move to another level because the person disappears emotionally. Does that make sense? And so this study was done at the University of Washington. And for 30 years, they would bring couples in siblings and different ones, and they would hook them up to all these monitors, and they would just give them things to discuss and arguments. And what they have found is relationships can overcome almost anything but these 4 things. And when they saw one of these, they would predict that the relationship would fail. In a marriage, they have a 95% accuracy in determining that if they see one of these, the relationship will fail within 5 years. So these are things we cannot overcome to move from chaos to acceptance. The truth about happy marriages. So I get my best information from Reader's Digest. This is a Reader's Digest article. The underline, I hope you can read it. Spouses in happy, stable marriages made 5 positive remarks for every 1 negative remark when they were discussing conflict. Did you get that? Successful, happy, stable marriages. What's the difference? For every 5 positive, or let's do it this way, for every 1 negative, it takes 5 positives to offset that. Does that make sense? That's pretty incredible. Couples headed for divorce offered less than 1 positive remark, 0.8 to be exact, for every single negative remark. So not hardly any compliments and a lot of negative. So what would we call that negative, those negative remarks? Criticism, right? Yeah. And so that's what that looks like. They listen respectfully to each other and find compromises that work for both of them. Truths about happy marriages. So, resolving conflict. The Bible talks about conflict and how to resolve that. Swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Swift to hear, better to hear than to react. Sometimes we think we know what the person is trying to tell us. Anger is influenced by our expectations, our value system, and our rights, what we think we are owed. For some people, it is safer to show anger than to acknowledge hurt. And yes, anger is a God-given emotion. But the problem with anger is when we get angry, and there's nothing wrong with anger, but we have to be careful that we don't use anger as a license to sin. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. Have you ever said something in an argument that you only said it when you were angry? And then the person calls you on it, and you say, I didn't mean it, I was angry. That's not, I didn't really, but here's the thing. If you've had someone say something to you in anger, it's not easy to forget that, is it? And it's same way if you say something in anger, it's hard for that person, because then it's like, yeah, but you thought it. And if you said it, then you must believe it, right? And so sometimes we allow anger to cause deep wounds, criticism, judgment, when it's not really where we want the relationship to go. Remember, this is resolving conflict, right? Or how to fight fair. The one thing I will tell you is don't fight angry. So how do we do that? How do I not fight angry? Well, we have to deal with that. And sometimes for me, I need to process. And so sometimes I'll say, can we deal with this later? It's okay to revisit conflict, to revisit a topic, because sometimes if you stay engaged, right, you're going to get angry and say something that maybe you would regret and don't want to say. But for some people, staying engaged is dealing with the conflict. Joyce and I are like that. We're dealing with it if we stay engaged. And where I process by thinking, so I need an opportunity to walk away, to think about it, and then come back and re-engage. But what would happen is I would leave the room mad, and she's like, are we done? Are we divorcing? Are we? And finally, we started talking through that process. And what I learned is that I need time to process. But how do I get her to give me time to step away to do that? And what I have found is if I will say, I need 10 minutes, I need a day, I need a week. What makes it work is that whatever I agree to, whatever we agree to when I'll come back, I have to come back. Does that make sense? I have to re-engage. As long as I make a commitment to her that I'm not forsaking the argument and I'm not forsaking our relationship, and she knows that I will be processing and I will be coming back, she can and will say, okay. And so it works much better. And so we don't have to do things in anger that we will eventually regret. Page 35, you worked through these. I want to talk about this just for a second. Did you guys share these? Did they share? Did you share? So obviously you did the 1 through 10. Again, as with the other list, 6 through 10 doesn't matter. 1 through 3 are going to be the ones you really need to deal with. And then on the other side, if they are or if they aren't, how big of an issue they are, that's what it is. So how do you deal with that? These things that are top 10 issues. Well, you want to set a time to talk about it, and if the conversation gets too heated, you may not get it resolved the first time. You may have to set it aside for a day, for a week, and come back to it, so you can start working through some of these marital issues. Choices in conflict. Swift to hear, slow to speak. That's a pretty good choice in conflict. This is a really good list. Choices. You're not going to resolve many issues in one argument. Focus on one. So you get contempt and judgment if you focus on the person. You are the problem, instead of whatever it is being the problem. Focus on the problem, not judgment of the person. Again, behavior, not character. We are who we are, right? My character, but I can change my behavior. Specifics, not generalization. And you never win with an always statement, because there's always one exception, right? Feelings versus character, same thing. I statements versus you statements. This is a really big issue. You statements go back to character, go back to judgment all the time. I feel, that's the kind of things. When we talk about feelings are fact. We feel how we feel, and we can't deny somebody, well, we can, but it doesn't make them go away, right? Observation of facts versus judgment of motive. Mutual understanding, winning and losing, and we've already touched on that. So the process. How we get to conflict resolution. forgiveness, understanding, forbearing. If someone offends you, we need to forgive them, give them room, be reconciled. We have the ministry of reconciliation, right? It's a job. And we have the words of reconciliation. It's going to take conversation to get there. I want to talk about forgiveness and what it is. What forgiveness is not. First of all, it is not pretending that something didn't happen or it didn't hurt, right? And you can't make that go away. It is not conditional. I will forgive you if. It is not forgetting. We'll always remember the hurt, but hopefully we won't always have to bring it back up. Forgiveness is not impossible. And forgiveness is commanded by God, letting go of resentment and my right to get even, an action that must be expressed by words and deeds, a choice to set the other one free from penalty and debt owed. So there's a big difference there of what forgiveness is not and what forgiveness is. We should seek forgiveness, be willing to admit, I am wrong. Is that easy? Even when you're wrong and you know it. You know, admitting it to yourself is a whole lot different than admitting it to your spouse, right? Or to a friend or to somebody else. But if we want forgiveness, we have to own it. Take responsibility for it. Be willing to say those 3 hard words and mean it, right? I am sorry. And be willing to repent. That's an interesting word. It means to turn back. To seek forgiveness means that this will not be a habitual sin that I will keep doing over and over again. Does that make sense? So if we're going to repent, this will be the last time you have to forgive me for that, or it won't be often. Does that make sense? Be willing to ask for forgiveness. Granting forgiveness privately. Don't go telling everybody. Specifically acknowledging what the person has done and that you release them from that graciously. We're all sinners and we're good at it, right? So some point you should be willing to grant forgiveness because next you may be the one seeking forgiveness. Does that make sense? And do it graciously. So some tools, a couple of things. There is a thing called XYZ formula. And it's simply this. In situation X, when you do Y, I feel Z. So if you could use that pattern, and I think I gave an example in the book. When we're driving down the road, you turn on the radio without asking, I feel like I don't matter. Instead of, who made you king of the radio? There's some contempt there, right? So, some name calling. So, who made you king of the radio is going to probably elicit some kind of argument, right? But stating the feeling, it makes me feel like I don't matter. Hopefully you want to deal with that. Turning on the radio isn't trying to tell you that. It's just telling you, I want to listen to the radio, right? So you can have a conversation. So what do we do when we're both in the car to turn the radio on and to move forward? What page are you on? Are you in the book? Are you with me? Okay, so scale of 1 to 10. There's 2 different areas here on the scale of 1 to 10. One is doing the scale of 1 to 10. Joyce and I came across this many years ago, and it is a great tool. From time to time, we'll ask each other, where are we on a scale of 1 to 10? And it's good to kind of get a reference. You know, if she says, hey, we're a 5 or 6 or, you know, wherever, it tells me, okay, I need to start focusing on us again. The second thing about the scale of 1 to 10, what you want to do is then ask your mate, let's say Joyce says we're a 7. What I'm going to ask next is, what one thing can I do to move us one number? What one need could I meet in this next week that would communicate to you that I love you? And she in return would ask, what one thing could I do to move us, to show you that I respect you? It's a powerful tool to communicate that. The second one is using the scale of 1 to 10 on how important is something to you. You ever gone to dinner and you're going to go out and you ask your spouse, where do you want to go? What's the response?
Where do you want to go?
Exactly. I don't know. Where do you want to go? And what is your spouse's response? I don't know. Where do you want to go? Right? I don't know. 15 minutes later, you're still asking yourself, I don't know. Where do you want to go? Right? So how do we deal with this? Well, so somebody eventually needs to make a suggestion. And so what if you both have something you want to do? You guys have Mexican food here? Mm-hmm. We have Mexican. You have Chinese food? Let's say your wife wants to go to Mexican and the husband wants to go to Chinese. How do you deal with that?
You go to Mexican.
Go. Do I need to go back? So how do you deal with when you both have things you want to do? You ever gone on a vacation and you start making a list? I want to do this. I want to go see family. I want to go visit a dead president, or, you know, right? And so how do you figure that out? Well, one of the tools we do with this 1 to 10 is we ask each other, how important is it to go see your aunt? How important is it to go see the dead president? How important is it to go to Mexican? How important is it to go to Chinese? You have to be honest. You can't say, oh, it's a 10. I win, right? But one of the things we have learned is that if we're honest answering that question, let's say, I want to go to, a national park, but it's not the end of the world, it's a 3, and she has something else she wants to do, and it's a 5. Well, it's easy for me to say, okay, we'll do what you want to do, knowing that when it's more important to me, we will do what I want to do. Does that make sense? So that 1 to 10, asking how important is this to you on a scale of 1 to 10. Another way to use that scale. Okay, date night. How many couples do date night? I got 3 couples doing date night. Every couple needs to do date night. The way in which we win our spouse is going on dates, right? Now, some of you, if you have a whirlwind, only dated for 2 weeks, that's maybe you didn't have a lot of dates. So one of the things that Joyce and I do is we have date nights. We try to do it once a week. That's perfect. Some of you, once a week is like, when do you find time to do that? Well, when we had kids, we were lucky if we did it once a month. We'd have a commitment to do it once a month, and we tried really hard to let nothing interrupt that, because that showed the importance of each other, how important we are to each other. And so I really encourage you to have a date night. Now here's the problem with having a date night. When you're dating, now when I was dating, the guy would usually pick the date or would say, what would you like to do, right? And then it's hard to always be the one responsible for coming up with what to do for the date. And so one of the things that we have done on date night is We rotate. So one night, for our date night, I will plan it. Then the next week, or the next month, or whatever, she will plan it. Here's the thing. Whatever I pick, she has to do. Whatever she picks, I have to do. Now, we're doing it not because I want to go do what she wants to do. I'm doing it because I want to spend time with her and communicate to her that it's important. So Joyce has gone to Blazer basketball games. She doesn't care for basketball, but she cares about me. So she'll go. I've gone to opera. I still do not like opera. And I don't want to ever go to another opera. But if she picks that for a date night, I will go. And here's the thing. I enjoyed it because she enjoyed it. Does that make sense? Now, normally, I don't want you to think that we pick things to torture each other. That's really not the idea. But it's about, I know that she'll do it because not that she wants to do the activity, but because she wants to spend time with me and I want to do it, and vice versa. Does that make sense? Oh, doesn't have to be expensive. Go to the park, go for a walk. Okay, 20 questions. There is in the book. What page does that start?
45.
What page?
45.
45. So question number 10. If you could change one thing about our marriage, what would it be? Good question. One thing, what would it be? 17. Where do you see our relationship in 5 years? Brother Deaver talked about in planning, financial planning, seeing the big picture. In your marriage, you need to see the big picture. Where are you going to be in 5 years? And then the last question is, will you please marry me all over again? I hope you would be willing to do that. Once a year or from time to time, I'd encourage you to read through those, ask them to each other. I think they'd be very revealing and very helpful. Thank you. Brother Tom, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
10-minute break.